Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Fire Authority meeting. I'd like to take the agenda in order, please. Item 1 is apologies.
I have apologies from Councillor Reynolds, Peterborough and Hewlett.
Any
Councillor
others?
Heathcote.
Thank
And I
you.
believe that Councillor Guymer, I've just had a message I can't contact. I think Councillor Guymer is read.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is minutes of the 11th of October. Is it your wish I sign those as a true record?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 3 is Chairman's announcements. Now, firstly, I'd like to welcome members of the public to this meeting of the Fire Authority. You're most welcome and hope that you find the meeting interesting. The Fire Authority supports the principle of transparency and encourages filming, recording and taking photographs at the meetings that are open to the public. Members advise that the meeting may therefore be filmed, recorded or photographed. On a further note, it is with great regret that I must report the death of former Chief Fire Officer Alan Gray. Alan was the longest serving Chief of Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service until he retired in the year 2000. May I ask all members of the authority to stand for a few moments in memory of Alan. Thank you.
As I suggest, as Councillor Heathcote and Guymer aren't here, that Councillor Bell and I move around this side and we don't have our back to everybody behind us and they can hear us.
It's up to you.
If I sit on the end, just so we don't have our back to people.
The next item on the agenda is item 5, which is the budget 2013-14. Oh, sorry. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any? Item 5, budget 2013-14.
Thank you, Chairman. The budget book in front of you actually has the recommendation as set out on page 14. The budget for 2013 has been prepared on the basis of an increase in the council tax of £4.95 for a family property. This increase obviously comes on the back of a relaxation by the Secretary of State around the tax capping rules for a number of authorities that sit within the lowest quartile of those similar funded authorities. And for us, Cambridgeshire Fire, we are one of the 8 fire rescue services that are able to take advantage of that increase. Having looked around at what others are doing, the other 7, if you like, around the country, it does appear to be certainly a move towards the £5 threshold. I've certainly been able to confirm that 4 other services are going down that route, and 3 others have not been able to confirm that they haven't yet released their budget papers. So that's effectively the national context. What it means for this fire and rescue service effectively is that the authority is safeguarding them beyond the 2014-15 financial year, obviously, which is the focus for the budget as it's being written now. We are aware that next CSR there is going to be some significant pressure again, on the same trajectory as we currently find ourselves, so we're looking probably another £3 million beyond. So effectively this budget is really around long-term future and building flexibility into our base that we wouldn't have otherwise. So happy to take any questions.
I think it's worth mentioning that having spoken to the Minister and got the opportunity to speak directly on the day of the release of the budget, I did ask whether this could be deferred and taken another point in time and was told in no uncertain terms, it's a one-year offer. It's an opportunity you ought to take to build your base. If that helps. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks. Can I just ask, what comments were there from members of the public? I have to ask.
Yes.
More than we normally get?
No, less than we normally get. Actually, we haven't had any comments this year. And that's pretty much symptomatic of where we've been in the past as well. We very rarely get any feedback on our budget this year. No exception.
Any other questions? The recommendation before us, which is on page 14. Can I have a proposal for the recommendation, please? Councillor Brown. Seconder? Thank you very much. We'll have a proposal and a seconder that the budget as presented in front of us and just outlined by Matthew is accepted. All those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 6 on the agenda is service redesign.
Thank you. We've obviously had the paper and had the opportunity to read it. I'll just very briefly talk through before I answer any questions through the chair. Since 2010, the organisation has been working through a budget reduction programme where we've been looking to try to save around about £4.2 million from our budget without impacting on frontline delivery of service. I'm pleased to say that based on the outcome of the spending settlement last year and the decision members have just taken, we will not have to remove any frontline resource between now and 2015, and we can now refocus, if members are minded to, back onto improving the way we deliver our services. The paper that follows this is the first in I guess a series of papers over the coming months, where we'll be looking at ways that we can use our budget more effectively and improve the level of service that we provide. Just as an aside to the cuts process, because the management team in conjunction with the Fire Authority were extremely prudent and able to identify very quickly where to make the cuts from the service budget, it actually did create a short-term surplus of over £1 million, and the entire £1 million has been invested back into our operations service. And I'm pleased to report that as a consequence, we will very shortly be taking delivery of 6 new rescue pumps that will be sited around the county and will significantly improve our ability to deal with road traffic collisions. So whilst we have been cutting on one hand, on the other side we have also been investing in our operational delivery of service. The cuts that we've made from our budget have, as was required by us, all made from our support services and other functions and not frontline services. And on the table, in the table on page 2, it identifies where those cuts have been taken from. You'll see there's a significant loss of staff, and that's because the vast majority of our budget is staff budget, so we have had to reduce, and it has been a very painful process, particularly in our support side, because we've taken the bulk of the savings from that part. £2.6 million, roughly 27% of our staff have been reduced in that area, which will obviously give us some difficulties in the future, but we feel that we can actually overcome those difficulties and still continue to provide a very good level of service for the public. The recommendation that comes from the paper is that we now move away from the cuts process and we refocus back onto service improvement, and I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Chair. There's just a point, just to make the same point here that I made at the Resources Committee, that 35 support posts have gone and I just wish to, it's an observation more than anything else, many of those would have been part-time, low paid work, and that is a great tragedy. I appreciate the position you're in, but I don't want that to go unnoticed.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? No more questions? We've got the proposition in front. May I have a proposal, please? And a second. Thank you very much. The recommendations in front of you are that we outline in 2.1 little 1 and 2.1 little 2. Those in favour, please show. Any against? Thank you. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, service improvement.
Again, as I spoke a few moments ago, this is the first paper, I guess, in our refocus back into improvement on our ability to deliver a service. And as I said, we recently took a decision to invest over £1 million back into the organisation, part of which is to invest in 6 new rescue pumps. Those rescue pumps will actually be able to do the majority of the work that our current rescue vehicles are able to do at road traffic collisions. There's a whole host of equipment that's going to go on the new pumps. They cost in excess of £250,000 each. They're part of our capital programme. There's some of the equipment that's going on, just to give you a flavour. We have an inbuilt winch that's going to go on the new appliances. We have high pressure air mats, which will enable us to lift very, very significant loads. We have a lorry access platform, which will enable us to access HGVs when we attend incidents of those. We have a water rescue sled, which means when we go to water incidents, we'll be able to take immediate action at water rescues. The appliances themselves will be fitted with automatic snow chains, so that we won't have problems in getting across the ground when it's snowy conditions. So there's a whole range of equipment that's going onto these pumps that's going to make them the capability of the organisation significantly better. Those appliances will be sited strategically around the county at our whole time and day crewed stations. So in the future, the rescue vehicle, the road traffic collision work that we do as an organisation will predominantly be done by these 6 vehicles that are coming onto line. So with that in mind, it then gives us an opportunity to look at how we might reinvest some of the resources we've got around the service to improve what we do. We have what's called the Operational Risk and Response Team. Now, when we introduced the fire watch system, which has been running for the last month or so, we had to find a way of losing the excess staff from the establishment. So we decided to create what we call the ORT. It's a fairly unwieldy name, but basically it's a group of whole-time staff who we will then be using to provide additional support to the service. And actually the support that they can provide is quite significant. At the moment we have up to 8 retained duty appliances off the run, i.e. not available during the daytime every day, and that's an average, and it can peak quite significantly higher than that. And that's a problem for us as an organisation, and despite the efforts that we've made over the last few years to increase our recruitment of retained staff, we still continue to struggle. So the ORT is a really good opportunity for us to find a different way to get the appliances that we can't turn out to turn out in the future. So as a management team, we felt that there was an opportunity there if we could fully establish the ORT, as opposed to the current situation where within the next 18 months there won't be one because natural wastage means that these people will have retired. If we could fully establish it, we would then be able to supplement some of our retained duty stations, which means we would then be able to turn appliances out. So we would like to fully establish that crew. So where to get the crews from was the next question. Now, as part of the cuts process, we identified areas that we could make cuts that would have what we call a tolerable impact on service delivery. And I just refer back to the paper I brought to you in May, and I presented you a table. And in that table, there was a number of cuts that we could make which would have what we call a level 4 impact on service delivery. And those would be 2 rescue vehicles, the St Ives second away RDS appliance, Ramsey's second away RDS appliance, Soam's second away RDS appliance. So what we did there in the public forum, I guess, is make the statement that we could take these cuts and still continue to deliver a service. It would have a tolerable impact. So, as a management team, we've looked at what the rescue vehicles do. We recognise that actually the use of the rescue vehicles is diminishing. The introduction of 6 new rescue pumps will actually mean that the rescue vehicles in themselves won't be used a great deal at all. So, opportunity there to take the crewing from the rescue vehicle at Huntingdon, redeploy it so that in the day we still continue to maintain that rescue vehicle, but then we also release some of those crew members into our AUT, which then means we can fully establish it, which then means we can provide additional support to our retain stations. Also, when we get protracted incidents, we have a group of whole-time staff that we can then commit to those incidents, to support the incidents. When we have spate conditions, we can do the same. So there's some significant benefits that will be derived. The good news is, and this is why it's an improvement, is because we're not talking about job losses. We're not talking about saving money. Actually, there's a small investment to actually make this work. We're not talking about losing appliances. Actually, what we're talking about is a significant improvement in how we can deliver a service. At night, we would obviously, there's obviously some give and take. At night, what we would have is a rescue vehicle at Huntingdon, still available, still able to be turned out if required, either by the whole-time crew that work at Huntingdon or the retained crew, and also a rescue pump at Huntingdon, with 5 people crewing it, with the capability to deal with pretty much every incident that every road traffic collision they attend. Now, I've been asked before about this. Now, does that mean that we don't need the rescue vehicles or the equipment that's on them? Well, we need to look at what the rescue vehicles do over the next 2 to 3 years, and we really need to get an understanding of what capability do we want from our rescue vehicles, what incidents do we think that we need them to attend, and therefore what equipment should we provide them, what should they look like, and how should we crew them. And that work we need to do over the next 2 or 3 years so that we can then look at a sustainable model for the rescue vehicles. Now, the big benefit this derives for members is that in 2015, if the projected continuation of cuts does manifest itself, and we find ourselves facing another 25% reduction in grant, which is the stated trajectory of the government at this point in time, that would be another £3 million of budget savings we would need to find. Now, between now and then, because we've already stated there's a number of areas that we could take cuts from the service without making a significant impact, we feel as a management team we want to make sure that we're actually using those staff as effectively as we can. So we can demonstrate that whilst this is a very small service, we've continued to improve and we're continuing to place our operational staff in the most effective position possible. So there then becomes an argument for us as an organisation to say to whoever, we are lean, effective, providing a good level of service, we need your support, and therefore cuts aren't necessarily what would be effective for this organisation. So that's the long short of the rescue vehicle. Chair, should I take questions on that and then move on to the second area? Or
Yeah,
so we don't confuse?
Fiona.
Okay, thank you. I had some questions about point 2 on the recommendations. I'll just yell. Hear me now?
There's a button on.
How's that? Am I
That's
on
better.
that? Okay. There are 2 points I wanted to make on the second of the recommendations. The first thing that I wanted to say was I worry about the first line that says, subject to the successful negotiation. It doesn't actually say anything in there about the word agreement. And although we might imply that there's agreement in there, what I would hate to see is that we have a long protracted bout of negotiation, don't actually get to an agreement, but then this is forced through. So I think the words, I think we need 3 extra words inserted in that first line. After subject to the successful negotiation of, I'd like to see the words and agreement to added in there. The second thing that I'd like to say about the RV, I think as most people know, I've spent quite a lot of time at Huntingdon looking at the RV and looking at a lot of the equipment that's on it. I think it's commendable that we're getting 6 new appliances that will have more equipment on them. But one of the things that we don't really talk about, it's not just the equipment that's on the RV, it's the specialist knowledge of the people who go out with those appliances. And I'm kind of worried if we're talking about making up crews with retained, etc., because one of the things that we've looked at this morning is there are lots of changes coming, and there are lots of fantastic things coming. We're hoping that we will get better, more retained firefighters in the service, but we're not there yet. So this seems kind of very premature to me to be talking about making changes when we don't actually have cast iron things in place to make sure that it runs in the way in which it's intended. So I'm not squashing it and saying absolutely no, never, but what I'm saying is what's here I don't think is going to work as it is at the moment. And that rescue vehicle is an amazing piece of equipment, and the firefighters who go out with it have got the most amazing specialist knowledge built up over years of doing it. And I'm just very nervous that we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater in making some changes.
Do you want to answer that, or do you want?
Yes, Chair, if I may. The rescue vehicle, as I've already said, not looking to get rid of the rescue vehicle, not looking to get rid of the equipment that's on it. Also, I totally agree. I think in many occasions when the rescue vehicle goes out, it's the fact that it has whole-time members of staff riding it is very important, because they do have significant knowledge that they can then impart at incidents. And I guess what I'm saying to members is, rather than having 2 people turning to rescue a road traffic collision, in the future we will have 5 people on 6 appliances instead of 2. So the difference is quite clear. We will have a good level of whole-time staff experience and knowledge turning up to incidents. Something we can't get away from is, if we move some resource from one place to another, yes, there's always an impact of doing that. And the impact is, under the proposals, is at night we will not fully crew the rescue vehicle. So what that means is, if the rescue vehicle is turned out at night on its own, it may have retained duty personnel turning it out. It may also have whole-time staff. If it does, that would be the rescue pump with 5 members of staff, which is 3 more than would go out on the rescue vehicle. So, you know, there's always a downside to every up. But actually, the other thing I guess that's important in all this is to look at the amount of usage that we use the rescue vehicle for. And the fact that we really can't get away from, and this is something that we looked at, we've been looking at over the last 2 years. We've looked at every single call that the rescue vehicle has attended, where it went to, what equipment was used off of the vehicle. And what we find is that over time, the use of the rescue vehicles is reducing. 75% of the work that the rescue vehicle does is at road traffic collisions. When we were looking at making cuts to the service, we said, well, we may end up losing these rescue vehicles, so what are we going to do to offset that loss? That's why we put in 6 new rescue pumps in. So, you know, we have now got the capability to deal with pretty much every incident, or we will have the capability to deal with pretty much every incident that the rescue vehicle goes to. How many incidents does the rescue vehicle attend? Well, Huntingdon's vehicle, which is what we're looking at the moment, that attends, and this is an average over the last 5 years, 174 calls per year, and that's to every incident it goes to. There's been quite a lot of conjecture, but actually it's 174 calls. In terms of the calls it goes to at night, and that's between 6 o'clock at night and 8:30 in the morning, that's 96 calls where it attends what we call a most serious incident, and that's per year. So that's a road traffic collision or a fire. If we look at the incidents where it goes to one of those most serious calls and spends more than 30 minutes at the incident, and our contention has always been, and it was in the business case when we looked at removal of the rescue vehicles, if a vehicle goes to an incident and spends less than 30 minutes there, it's probably not doing what it's designed to do, because to turn up to an incident, make a risk assessment, remove the equipment off of the vehicle, use the equipment, make the equipment back up, and then get back on the appliance and go back to the station, we don't think that the vehicle is doing what it's designed to do within 30 minutes. So if we take those calls out, we then reduce ourselves down to 19 calls a year at night where that vehicle is used. Now the crewing cost for the vehicle at night is around about £200,000 a year. And that's why we feel that actually we could use that significant investment, that significant resource, and actually move it to somewhere where it could do a great deal more good than it currently does. Because in the longer term, when we hit 2015, it's going to be very difficult to justify a rescue vehicle when we're looking, if we are, and it looks likely we might be, looking to justify a rescue vehicle that costs that amount of money to do that many calls.
Yes, Jan. Just tap that. That's working.
Thank you. I just wondered if the AUT model has been trialled and established anywhere else, and if it has, if it is successful.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think anybody back can hear.
Get it shouting. Let me try again. Can you hear me now? Thank you. I just wanted to find out.
I say Norfolk on the way up.
Do you want me to ask the question again? So you
Yes, please.
Right. I was asking if the AUT model has been trialled and established anywhere else, and if it has it been successful?
I've just taken some advice from Group Commander Foster, who's works with me on this project, and the answer is yes. In our region, Norfolk is operating a model that could be described as being similar. In terms of success, we think it will be very successful, and it's already demonstrating its worth, because we're just about to to help us supplement our crews. So what that meant is, rather than taking frontline crews off of fire appliances when we were training, we've actually used members of the AUT to supplement that crew. And also at the moment, because the AUT's in place, we are using it because we've got one or two people who are on long-term sick. We're actually using those to supplement some of our crewing. So there's lots of uses that we can put the AUT to. Unfortunately, at the moment, we haven't got the agreement to use the AUT to go out to retain stations to crew the appliances, and that's part of the negotiation which was discussed earlier, because clearly we wouldn't want to impose that, and we're having discussions with the union about how we make that happen. But it's really important that for the AUT to work, the crews will need to go to retained stations so that they can then ride on a retained appliance where that appliance is short to supplement the crew.
Councillor Sale.
Is this working? Is that better? I think you turned it off. Oh, right. This paper is my response to this paper is a bit curative. Quite simply because in principle I'm opposed to any cuts to public service, and I think that that's the right position for me to adopt, and it is in fact a position that I hold. And the difficulty I have here is that the first part of this paper I believe constitutes an improvement to the service. I do not have a difficulty with the proposal to establish a purpose-built new station at Burwell and amalgamate the two stations. I think that makes perfect sense to me. And I know that there are some problems, that there are some technical difficulties that have been raised, but I think that this will enable a better service to be delivered. When it comes to the next item, though, I just cannot support that. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions. I'm not satisfied with the clarity of some of the arguments, and I mean, really, the provision of a rescue vehicle based at Huntingdon is the motorist, the M14. The A14 uses ultimate insurance policy, having that vehicle there, a dedicated vehicle there that serves that function. And I will not be supporting this paper on that basis.
Councillor Darling.
Apologies for being late, Chair. I'm in agreement with Paul. We have not had enough information in this document to make a reasoned decision on any of these things. I am.
So can you speak up if
Sorry. I am very concerned that although we hear about how bad the property is and all the rest of it, effectively this is taking away a retained station, and that's a retained station from around Cambridgeshire. You know, that there is a worry about that. You know, that is less capacity. And so from that point of view, I still don't think that there is enough information in here to make that run. The other thing is about the ORT and rescue vehicle. Again, we know that this has quite a lot of relevance, again, to the A14 and to not taking away pumps from when they're needed in house fires and other incidents. So again, I still don't think you have done enough in this paperwork to convince me.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what provisions are there to train people that go into the York? Because if you're going into the York from obviously working on a pump all the time, and then you're going to be left in a retain station for a number of weeks, obviously there's an implication for your training and skills to go down. So is there anything going to be done to firefighters can maintain the skills?
Sorry, take that, Chair. If I could just refer back to the previous, just for a moment. Out of the two recommendations that are coming forward, I struggle with the concept that the rescue vehicles are cut. I understand the point that's been made by the councillor, and just for reassurance, the rescue vehicle tends to go to road traffic collisions, so the pump will still be there, but also there will be a new rescue pump which will be able to carry out well in excess of 90% of the road traffic collision work that the current rescue vehicle does. So hopefully that will help to allay that. Out of the two proposals, the rescue vehicle, as I said earlier, no job losses, no reduction in the amount of money, an improvement in the level of service. In terms of Swaffham, there is no two ways about it. We have for a number of years, and I haven't moved on to this, I suppose, probably a good time to. For a number of years we've had two fire stations that have been inextricably linked. They're not fire stations, they're buildings. One's an old pub, the other one's a garage that was built by the employer of the people who worked on the site and happened to work at Swaffham. So very closely linked, and we've been looking for a number of years to try to find somewhere where we could put a single purpose built fire station with its own training facility. Because again, neither of those sites has a training facility. So it would make sense for us to come together and provide a much better facility for the local population. But you could argue, yes, instead of being two fire stations, there will be only one. The difficulty we have with Swaffham is the fact that we are struggling to turn it out. We've only managed to turn it out, it was 5 times last week, but it's been up to 3 times in the last week. But the number of times we're able to turn the vehicle out is around about 15% of the times it's called. So that's 15 in 100. So most of the time, the station ground is being covered by other appliances. Because the reality is Swaffham is too small to provide a crew there. And it's as simple as that. So, you know, it's sort of academic really. At some point in time, we will have to do something with Swaffham because we are struggling to crew it. So we'll have a fire engine there, but we can't crew it. In terms of the question that was asked, I mean, the training of the staff that go to the York, that's a really important point, and we spent a long time actually deliberating how we would make the York work and not just have it as a group of people who knew that eventually through natural wastage it would disappear. And actually the York we see very much as a development opportunity, so staff will go into the York for 12 to 18 months, they'll come off of their watch, they'll go into the York, they'll get the opportunity to increase their range of skills. They'll learn about different aspects of firefighting that they didn't know before. They'll get the opportunity to do work in community safety. So that is the control buzzer, so it's asking the control members to start to go down. We'll just wait for a second. It will stop. So we see it as a good opportunity to develop our staff, move them into the org, get the opportunity to see what goes on in the wider organisation, and then at the end of 12 to 18 months, go back to their station and back onto the watch, or hopefully, if we've developed them and they're so inclined, to move on through the organisation. So there's some benefits that we would attach to that as well.
So Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to start, please, with the Swaffham situation. I have to admit, it is not an area with which I am familiar, but from what I see on the paper, the proposals sound excellent to me. It looks to me where you have a total of 153 calls in 5 years, of which 61 of those are what you call false alarms. It brings you down to 92 actual main calls in that time. It does not, to me, seem a sensible idea to keep that situation going. And with what you're offering, a completely new setup with a new training centre and new machinery, I think that is the way to go. But there will be local members who know more about that than I do. Talking about local members, I would just like to talk briefly about the Huntingdon situation. I am on record as saying that I do not want to see any deterioration in the fire service at Huntingdon. It's a lifeline to Huntingdon and Huntingdonshire, and I will defend it to the hilt. But what I would say is, and here I don't agree with Councillor Whelan, subject to the successful negotiation where she wants to put in agreement, I think to me those words that are in the motion are clear. These proposals will not go ahead unless we have successful negotiation. I think that is quite clear, and I'm happy with that. In the past, since I've been on this authority, some 2.5 years I think it is, I have found that the negotiations that have taken place with the unions and the officers of the fire service in Cambridgeshire have been extremely cordial, well received and very successful. I hope that will continue, and I would like to see these negotiations successfully completed. Thank you.
Any other comments? We have 2 recommendations. Do I have a proposer for the recommendations? I've got one, the proposer. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Vice Chairman. Those in favour of the recommendations in front of us for the part 2, and also we've covered now, I think, the Swaffham deliberations. Please show. Those against? And abstentions? One abstention. Thank you very much. Concludes item 7. Item 8. Information on Communications Technology Shared Service. I understand you, Matthew, isn't it?
It is, Chairman, thank you. I'll wait.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Matthew, would you like to carry on? Item 8.
Thank you, Chairman.
Don't get aggressive.
Some members will recall, some time back now, since 2010, we've been working in close quarters with Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service with regard to ICT, so all our technology, and the 2 teams have been working closely together to update and align all of our back office infrastructure. We've invested heavily over the last couple of years. We continue to invest in our technology to bring it up to a real modern day standard. Where we are now is that those two sets of technology are pretty much alike, so we're working off the same platforms, if you like, same sets of kit, and we're at a point really where the two separate teams don't necessarily provide us with the resilience that we need moving forward. So what this proposal is around us merging those two teams together under a new structure and actually starting to better resource ourselves from a resilience perspective, but also from a skills perspective as well, to make sure we've got the right people with the right skills across the two services. At the moment, on our own, it's extremely difficult for us to maintain those level of skills. We're asking maybe one person can have a wide variety of skills, where actually it's better to have more of a specialist in a particular field. And what this will do is hopefully give us that opportunity and afford us that opportunity. So what I'm asking the authority today is, will you permit us now, we've done all that back office stuff and updated all of our infrastructure, to move on to the next stage, which is effectively to merge the teams. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service and the authority are also taking a paper similar to this to their authority next week for them to obviously give them the go ahead as well. So hopefully the two authorities will approve, and then we'll start to move forward with the amalgamation of those two teams. It is focused on ICT at this moment in time, largely due to the specialist nature of the functions that we support. So happy to really take any further questions on that. Just to re-emphasise, it's not about saving money though. This is not about saving money. Okay. In the long term we may do, in the short term certainly not.
I've got Councillor Hoy, Councillor Guymer.
I just wondered why it wasn't about saving money, because IT, it's one of those things that years ago everyone thought was a big thing, and now everyone's doing it in their working life all the time. And looking at the infrastructure chart, it just does seem very, even still for two organisations, I think it does still seem very staff heavy. And I mean, it just worries me that you're saying, it's not about. I mean, I don't think we should say let's go and raid the IT to save some money, but I think there needs to be, if these people are surplus to requirements, there's no point having staff just for the sake of it, and it does seem very heavy on staff to me.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of, if we just put it in some context, across the two services, we're supporting upwards of about 1,600 users as a starting point. And what this does support is all of our critical infrastructure. So this is around control room, so this is around a mobilising system. And actually what we're saying here is that I'm not going to have 2 or 3 people to support that infrastructure. I'm having one person to support that infrastructure, supported by two other people across the two services. And likewise for our networks, one person will support both services. So actually this is around, as far as we can, building resilience, and not just having single points of failure like we have at the moment. There obviously has to be a minimum level of staffing that we require, and actually what we built this on is actually a minimum level. So actually I wouldn't say that we can go any further than what we're suggesting here at this stage.
I think the point of recognising that as well, Councillor, is we are a 24/7 service, and you can only spread the margarine so thin. Councillor Garner.
I'll get the button right. The thing that I felt missing was numbers. It would be useful to know how many mapping units we have, how many servers we have, how many Blackberries we have, how many laptops, because then you can't really have a good judgment on how to provide a service if you don't have those sort of level of numbers.
I think the key number for me is the users. And actually that's 1,600 users between the two services. And actually those users will be, lots of them will have Blackberries, lots of them will have laptops, but actually what we have to remember is that we're trying to provide a flexible solution to all of our users. So at the moment we're moving towards, from an operational perspective, move towards a tablet. So they can put information straight onto a tablet, and then it syncs with our back office systems. For real safe systems of working. That needs supporting. And at the moment we don't have those systems in place. So this is really around providing infrastructure to support all of those technological advances as well. We're not there yet, that's the other point. We are not actually at the end point. It's what this is all striving to get us to, that end point.
Supplementary?
Chair, I still think we need numbers to know how many we're thinking about. You know, whether it's a 20% of your 1,600 on Blackberries or on tablets, we really would be useful to know that information.
I think the way the technology at the moment is being upgraded throughout the service has got to be one of the key factors within what you're doing. I mean, we're actually installing new technology in every station. That's going forward. All of that's got to be maintained. And at the moment, we're struggling to maintain a service 24/7 and give resilience to that. Now, at the moment, the tube between us and Bedfordshire is there for them to back us up and us to back them up. What we're actually doing at the moment is begging and borrowing and using those personnel flexibly. What this does is formalise the process. It's nothing new, but if we wanted to really go it alone, it would be far more expensive. And I think what's being proposed here is just to formalise what we've been doing for some time. Councillor Goodwin.
Hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know really, Matthew, where this specialist is coming from. Is it from one of the teams or is it a new post?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn my mic on. Thank you. Once the draft structure is approved, clearly there'll be a consultation process with the affected staff, because there will be new job descriptions issued. And then at that point, there may be that we don't have the necessary skills within the organisation, and it might be that we have to go outside. So we'll have to look, obviously, open-mindedly at that.
So it could be.
Chief Fire Officer wants to go.
Yeah, just to reflect what Matthew said, I don't think we should really be looking at ICT departments currently for cost savings. Every project that we've got going on in this authority, and I'm sure the same is in Bedfordshire, requires some technological input to it. In other words, we're relying on technology in other parts of the organisation to help us save money in those parts of the organisation. If anything, I think the ICT departments are probably in the next few years going to be a growth area. And I think perhaps the authority might want to focus on is, well, if we're growing that area, where are we saving money in other areas through the better use of the technology that's available?
I think if you travel around some of the stations and look at the improvements we're making, technology on vehicles and all the rest of it, I think some people are running to stand still at the moment, and that this is going to give the resilience within that. Any other questions? Have a proposal in front of us, a recommendation, agreed? Thank you. Brings on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 9. Pay policy statement. Is that you again, Matthew?
It is, Chairman, thank you. Members will cast their mind back to last year, the Secretary of State, part of the Localism Act, they got a duty on to all authorities to approve an annual pay policy statement. The policy statement you have in front of you, Appendix 1, mirrors pretty much last year's statement. The only changes there have been throughout the statement, the table at section 4, where it says heads of service operational, those figures have actually changed slightly from last year. They've gone up by 1%, but that's in recognition of the framework conditions for operational staff. There was a national agreement for a 1% pay rise, and then below that there's been new pension scheme contributions that have been put in place at section 5, where there's now tiered contributions for operational colleagues. Other than that, the actual pay policy statement itself is exactly as it was last year. There's been no other changes to that.
Any questions? Yes, to Councillor Bell.
We discussed this at the policy meeting a couple of weeks ago, and a question was asked regarding the ratio, the relationship to the lowest paid employee. The current ratio is 1:10.
Can you move the mic a little closer?
Yes. The question was raised at the time whether the lowest paid employees within the fire service were being paid the living wage for the area. Now, we actually asked the finance director to look into that, and it might be good if he could actually put on record the case that he found.
Thank you, Councillor. I can. The living wage is quoted as being £7.45 per hour. The lowest wage that we actually pay per hour is £8.15 currently, and actually that is likely to increase with the reorganisation that we've just been through on all of our administration, business support staff. Actually, they're going up to a higher grade than what they were previously, so actually that will increase. And actually, if the members would like, I'll bring back the updated figure once that's actually happened on the 1st of April. So we are paying above the local living wage for everybody in the service.
National living wage, actually.
And the national, yes.
Councillor Garner?
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of words I wondered if it would be possible to change. On page 6, it says about professional qualifications, which is required for the role. Could we possibly change that to essential for the role?
Chair, sorry, Chair. There's a point of order. This is not a motion we're being asked to change, which is what you normally change in amendment. It's supporting information, which is the privilege of the officer.
Yep.
Can I suggest to you, Chair, that we ask the officer if he wouldn't mind changing it to essential?
You want to comment on that, Matthew? Top of page 6.
Okay. I think I'd like to leave it as required, if we may, to give us the flexibility, because actually it may be that we need, it's a requirement, and actually it brings up a standard, but it might not necessarily be essential, and that's the flexibility I'd like.
You prefer?
Yes.
Any other points, Councillor Graham?
Yes, it was also on the bottom of page 6. It says no special payments are routinely made to individuals leaving the authority's employment. I wondered if we could ask the officer if perhaps we could change that to never.
No, that would be the response, because we may need that flexibility in the future to protect the authority, or I may need that.
Okay. And then the other thing I wondered if the officers, when they put this together, sorry, I believe it's wrong, actually looked at salary and looked at the reduction in staff. And normally your salary is commensurate with how many staff you're supervising. And we, on page 2 of this document for the budget, saw that we had a 27% reduction in support staff, a 12% reduction in command staff, and a 14% reduction in whole time. And I just wondered if, when the officers looked at that, they thought about reducing the salaries because that's 65 staff they're no longer supervising.
I think the actual contract that the officer signs, a 3-year binding deal, which I understand.
Contracts of employment, Jim.
Can you answer the point, mate?
Yes, so no, they're not open to the issue.
Would you like to answer?
May I have a supplementary?
Yes.
Can it be considered for future staff?
Chief Fire Officer.
In terms of the conditions of service, they're nationally agreed. So actually, people are employed based on national terms and conditions. We have an assessment criteria which all posts are subject to before somebody's appointed to them, and once that assessment determines the spinal point, the pay point of those employees are appointed upon.
It's always open to the authority when it appoints new officers to determine what their remuneration package is, particularly if they sit outside the grey book conditions.
Any other comments? Recommendation in front of you? Approved? Thank you very much. Item 10. Jeff's taking this. Over to you.
Okay, can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
As the paper says, the member officer protocol has not been looked at for quite some time. So we just took the opportunity to look at it and see whether it needed updating. The only major alteration, as I say in 4.2, is updated it to take into account the changes in the members' code of conduct. We took the paper to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 18th of October, and they recommend it through to the authority for approval. The only alteration that Overview and Scrutiny made, if you look at page 2 of the actual appendix, the 3.1, the very final bullet point, we added at the request of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And if you're happy with the protocol, we plan to look at it on an annual basis and bring it back if it's necessary to make any alterations.
Any comments? Yes, yes, I've one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of Overview and Scrutiny, and I have to apologise that I was unable to make the meeting on the 18th of October. But I want to, it's one point that I have an issue with, which is under 3.2 on page 3, and it's the third bullet point from the end on 3.2, where it says to obtain agreement in advance from the station commander or other senior officer to visit premises. One of the things that I take very seriously as a member of this fire authority is that I turn up to the meetings here, but I also go out and talk to staff to find out what's going on. At no time do we get in the way. We understand how the fire and rescue service works, but I think it's a serious constraint on our work as independent members of the fire authority to have to get agreement in advance from a station commander or a senior officer, and that really worries me, because it doesn't say how much warning we have to give. It doesn't say who is definitely going to give that authority to us. Supposing the station officer isn't there. So we all have common sense. We know what the fire and rescue stands for. Sorry, can I finish my point first? Thank you. We all know what the fire and rescue service stands for, but I think it's a bit of a slap in the face for members of the fire authority to be told that we have to be almost in effect chaperoned when we turn up. And I really, this is the only point in this that I have a bit of an issue with. Thank you.
I don't think it's chaperoning that's intended. I think it's just notification for health and safety reasons. But
well, I just think, I'm sorry, but I just think it's common courtesy. You know, if I was going to anybody's office or place of work, I would never just turn up. I would always ask for.
Sorry, Chair. I think our comments are supposed to be directed through the Chair. I am entirely entitled to my opinion on this. I disagree with it. As a member of the Fire Authority,
fair enough.
I'm there to negotiate with people at stations.
I'll get it answered by an officer.
Thank you.
Chief Fire Officer.
I can understand why you might be concerned that we want to chaperone you on fire stations and fetter your access to firefighters who might also be your constituents. I can fully appreciate that. And that is certainly not the intention of what's in this paper. We have, particularly around retain stations, competence is a major issue for us. Health and safety is linked to that competence. We struggle in 2 hours a week to keep our firefighters trained and competent at retain stations as it is. What we do need to do, because we have a routine set of visits also that officers undertake to keep people updated on what's going on in the organisation. So it really is about controlling access to fire stations to ensure that we don't week after week or unintentionally constrain even further the training time that's available to them. That's really what's behind that document. It's not that we wish to constrain or fetter in any way. It's purely about keeping control of training hours and making sure that things roll on properly.
Chair, can I have a supplementary?
Yes.
Because it's, as Councillor opposite says, notification. We're not talking notification, the word is agreement. And there is a very big difference between agreement and notification. None of us, I entirely understand what the Chief is saying, none of us want to turn up and strain, and we particularly know the issues around retain, and we don't want to get in the way. But I think if you want to pop in and find out how firefighters really feel about things, and and get feedback so that we're coming to these meetings and we're making an informed decision when we're voting on things. Having heard from SMT and from people out on the ground, I do think that it is a real constraint on our independence as Fire Authority members if we have to get agreement before we turn up at stations.
I don't think it's ever intended to withhold the agreement. I think it's...
But that's what it says in the paper.
Are you satisfied with the notification?
Well, the problem is what we don't want to do is we don't want a situation where, for example, Chris Strickland's been down there 1 week, some officers from ICT or another department have been down there the following week, and then a member wants to go the week after, and we end up with a month without actually any training being done. So it's agreement in terms of timing, if you like, rather than agreement in terms of can you go on the fire station. It's about making sure that the timing is appropriate and right.
But what I come back to, we are independent, sorry Chair, we're independent members. We also have time constraints. My month I have 9 parish council meetings, I have various other meetings. If I'm then being told, no, you can only turn up on a Tuesday between 4 and 6, that actually may not fit in, and it may give me a real problem as a member who wants to pop in. I've got enough common sense that if, we do normally ask in advance, we don't always turn up unannounced, but I think to take that away from independent members of the Fire Authority is something that is bad for us as a Fire Authority.
Would you accept that on training evenings, agreement is required?
I'd be very happy with that, Chair, thank you.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but I'm getting a bit confused here. All it actually says is to obtain agreement in advance from station commander, blah, blah. The station commander, I would have thought, would have addressed your issues you're talking about. There is no restraint. You've never had restraint yet. No, because absolutely. So what I'm saying is I think the wording here is fine, and I hate to say this, it sounds a little bit like nitpicking.
I have to disagree. It's something I feel very strongly about. We are an independent fire authority,
Right,
and once you start talking about getting agreement...
You made a point, it's obviously my wording is not going to be accepted by the members. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have to agree with Councillor Whelan that I believe that wording should be changed, because occasionally it has been suggested that maybe we shouldn't go, and I have seen emails to that effect. I have always turned up to my local one after they finish their training, and you are actually asking Fire Authority members to have a conversation in the car park or on the street rather than within the building if it's not been agreed by somebody. And quite often with retained, it's very difficult to get hold of the station commander. They are not necessarily easily on the other end of the telephone when somebody points something out to you that you feel you need to follow up.
Just a minute. Can you keep your comments through the chair, please?
Yeah, wouldn't it make everyone happier if you just, I know it sounds really, if everyone's getting into nitpicking now, but at the end, could it say something along the lines of station commanders must not reasonably withhold agreement? So someone can't be unreasonable. I mean, that to me seems, that seems a pretty fair negotiation.
All right, fine. We've got that. Councillor Peterborough.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I thought the bath rules were last night. I must have come to the wrong occasion. I mean, if I go to a school governance meeting, I am told that you cannot go into the school without talking to the head teacher on security grounds, and of course health and safety. I think it is only right and proper and courteous to go through the procedures that are laid down in this document. I don't see any problem with it, quite honestly.
Well, we've got a proposition that we change the wording, and I gather a proposition we've done. I'll take the change of the wording. All those in favour to change the wording? We'll just change it. We'll work the wording out in a minute. Just those in favour of changing. There's 3. Those against? Thank you. So I think that's lots. We now take the document as it sits. We've had some discussion on it. The recommendation in 2. Members agreed. Those against? None against. Thank you very much.
Abstentions, please.
Abstentions 3. Thank you. Agenda item 11. We had this on the agenda for one of the subcommittee meetings, policy committee. Councillor Peterborough.
Thank you, Chairman. In the light of the information that's been provided since the meeting, I would like to propose that we continue with our membership of the LGA.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. That was nice and quick and painful. Roger. Item 12, freedom of information. There's plenty of that today. Who's taking this one?
I'm taking it, Chairman. The policy at the moment has been that we don't actually charge for any information you supply with the freedom of information. It happened recently that we got a request for a fire report, and it was realised, because fire reports are normally charged for, we tried to charge the individual for the fire report. He pointed out that our scheme did not actually spell out that we would be charging for that. So I then revisited the actual wording of our charging part of the scheme, and true enough, you see in 4.2, that's all it says at the moment. So I'm bringing this paper before you to try and get the charging policy clarified more, because that's rather a bit of a skimpy piece of information. You'll see the paragraph which we put on 5.1, which actually sets out clearly the policy as I see it should be. It just repeats that in fact we will not normally charge under £450, but £450 is a threshold the government set. If we reckon that the actual work of a member of staff to actually look into a particular request would cost more than £450, we can actually decide not to go ahead with that and notify the individual unless they're willing to pay the total sum. So that's why I put that at the bottom of the actual paragraph. We took this to the policy committee at its meeting at the end of January, and they wanted some wording change added on to reflect that the Chief Fire Officer has the opportunity to waive any charges. If you look at the minutes of the meeting, which are item 15, the paragraph on charging has been replicated at the bottom of number 14 on the actual paper, and we've actually inserted the words, the Chief Fire Officer has the power to waive any charges at the end of the second and last paragraph. So that's taken on board what the policy committee has actually asked. So I'm asking you to approve the policy here, which will actually clarify exactly where we should be going on the charging.
Yes, please.
It's just a very quick question, Chair, for Ms Taylor. Does that put us in exactly the same place as the districts and the county?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Garner?
It was just something that occurred to me. Do we have to always print it out? And if it was sent by email PDF, would that be cheaper?
Most of our stuff is actually sent on electronically, but this particular report is a hard paper report, so that's why we charge for it. Normally it's companies, insurance companies and loss adjusters that want these sort of things, but occasionally, like this individual, he actually wanted it. It's a hard copy.
Okay.
Can I have a supplementary just to say, can we actually say that that would be the preferred method for most people?
We can certainly look into it, but we'll still charge.
Agreeing the policy? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 13, there is one change, which is that I think the project's ended anyway, isn't it? That's useful. Which is the STEP project. I think that's coming to an end anyway, isn't it, Matthew?
Sorry?
STEP project's coming to an end?
Yeah, we'll go live next week.
You go live next week, so Councillor Reynolds come off that. Any other comment? Thank you very much. For information, item 14, minutes of overall scrutiny, January 16. Members got a copy for the 31st of January. Agreed? Item 16, minutes of Resources Committee, 20th of December. You've actually just agreed that a few moments ago. Thank you very much indeed for your time. The meeting concluded.